Every 2 hours, an American child is killed by a bullet. The victims and the killers are getting younger. The street culture is getting tougher.
If they run up on me, they gonna get shot.
A whole generation growing up in the inner cities accepts the threat of death as a way of life.
You gotta go sometime.
Across the country, schools check for weapons on children as young as 11. By the end of the century, guns could kill more of them than anything else.
It's an epidemic, and an epidemic that's out of control.
And the epidemic is filling America's hospitals with more and more victims like this boy, who was shot by a kid.
James, time to get up. Wake up.
For James Wade, each morning brings back memories of what he now regards as the mistakes of his past. Before he reached his teens, he joined a street gang and took up the violent life gang membership entails, dealing in and using drugs, carrying and using guns. Now he's paying the price. At 17, he became a victim as well as a criminal. James was shot in the neck by a member of a rival gang. Once an athletic boy, he's lost the use of his legs and most of his control over his upper body.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for again another day. Lord, I give you thanks for your mercy. In Jesus' name, give you praise. Amen.
The daily pain with which he pays for what happened has turned James into a sinner who wants to repent. He believes he was spared death so that he can teach others what his experience taught him.
The main lesson I learned was that you should never go off your instinct of going for good over bad. You know, because all the time I was choosing, you know, even before I would do a crime, it would be that little instinct to say, James, you know that's not right.
Michael Richardson did not have time to learn that lesson. At 14, he was shot while riding his bicycle in the local park. His funeral doesn't even merit the attention of the local news here.
Oh, to my Father's house, yes, to my Father's house, you ought to come and...
In an average week, 4 or 5 youths between 11 and 20 die violently in Chicago alone.
There is peace, wonderful peace, glorious peace.
We're living in a day and a time where tomorrow is not promised. Today is not promised. And unless we acknowledge and take heed, we're going to lose more and more of our young people.
Chicago boasts the largest housing development in the world. The Robert Taylor homes feel more like the world's largest prison. It has its own police force, and every weekend they collect an impressive haul of weapons from the residents. They're held in a storeroom before being taken away and melted down, just some of the estimated 200 to 400 million guns at large in America. Some of the pieces in this extraordinary arsenal were taken from children as young as 9.
Out of the 1,400 weapons that we have on hand, approximately 300 are confiscated from juveniles. This was confiscated off of a 15-year-old boy. This is a 12-gauge shotgun. It's been sawed off, the barrel as well as the stock. If this particular weapon was fired at any individual, it would cut them in half. This is an Intratec 9mm weapon. It was taken from a 15-year-old boy.
What would a 15-year-old boy want with that?
Basically, more than likely, he was a drug dealer, and usually they have various different types of weapons in order to protect their turf.
Outside the strong room, 2 suspects arrested after a 17-year-old was shot. All part of a routine day here.
One of the guys they arrested earlier is an adult, so a bunch of people were there with him.
Sergeant Washington leads his team on what he calls a walk down in one of the high-rise buildings.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
It's part visible patrol to establish police presence, part search to control the constant flow of drugs and weapons.
This is clear. We found a number of guns. It's a hiding place for guns and narcotics. There was a bathroom. I always check the medicine cabinets. Nobody's been in here in a while. Yeah, something like that. What's up? What you got?
This is a breeding ground for crime, young crime especially. The sergeant puts unemployment at 80%, broken homes and teenage parents are commonplace.
So, staying out of trouble, Raven?
They've had 200 shots fired in a day here sometimes. It makes near prisoners of the children. Evidence of the dangers they face outside is everywhere. This young man was hit in a drive-by shooting.
Night train. Yeah, what's up?
Most of the older generation here are already lost.
Whose house is this? Somebody stay there? That's your house, okay. How you doing?
The young are learning the lessons of crime early. The police search even small children because the drug dealers often use them to carry their merchandise and do the dirty work of shooting. Catherine Castelny has studied the impact of violence on children in places like Mozambique and Lebanon. She says there's an arms race in America's playgrounds.
Do you ever hear any gunfire?
Yeah.
No?
I do every day.
Every day.
We got somebody every day. Somebody get killed.
In a sense, it's worse than growing up in a place like Bosnia or Northern Ireland, because in a real war zone, children believe that the war will end someday, whereas here the violence is continuous. They've known it all their life. They really don't think that the violence is going to stop. You know, and also in war zones, it's very clear who the enemy is. And here it's not so clear because a person who's playing with you on Saturday morning can also be the person who kills a friend of yours at school.
Down with Joe! Up with hope! Come together! Save the children!
Helen Sumblin joins a march to reclaim the streets from crime. Unlike the Robert Taylor homes, this was once one of Chicago's more elegant neighborhoods, a place to bring up families. And its residents are fighting to take it back from the drug dealers. As things stand, fear makes them prisoners in their own homes.
It's like a hell. If they're not shooting, they're jumping and beating people. If you're out there, if you're lucky, you might miss it. You done? That's you. Another statistic. And what do? Scoop you up. That's it. They're doing about it, we're still looking.
Helen has good reason to speak with bitterness. Her nephew had just become another statistic. Only 2 days earlier, she'd seen 15-year-old Michael Richardson buried. One of the daily victims of the gunfire on the streets, Michael should have begun his first term at high school in September.
My nephew had a promising life. He had even started high school. He don't even know what it is to go in there and say, what period is my lunch? Where is the gym room? He'll never get to know what that is about. While some skis or sleeves, whatever, still walking the street.
A killing does not interrupt the work of the young drug dealers, and they are very young. This boy is only 11. When we spoke to them, he produced a revolver and handed it round for inspection. The way they handled the gun suggested experience and a soldier's feel for his weapon.
This called a 38 Smith & Wesson snub nose. It's just as powerful as all other guns, but this is a pistol grip. It's easy for you to handle.
They operate as a syndicate, dividing the work of selling their drugs and protecting their turf. They deal in crack cocaine, making, they say, around $2,500 a day.
Street value, that is $10.
It's a business, and guns are part of it. They say they'll use any weapon that fits the purpose.
Whatever comes in hand. What I can get, that's what I use.
Their leader is 15.
Really, I don't carry a gun because he's like my security guard. Wherever I go, he go.
Sean is 30.
Basically, I use any gun that comes to hand. Only gun I really can't handle is a sawed-off shotgun. It's too powerful. I can't deal with that.
It's sometimes difficult to separate the child's boast from the killer's threat, but these boys have a street reputation to back up their words.
I just shot a boy the other day. Because I was walking down the street, me and my friend, and he started talking about how he was going to jump on me. So I made him chase me in the alley, and I shot him 3 times in the chest.
Any young person who is not saved, come here. Come on down here. Come down here.
At Michael's funeral, the pastor tried to give some meaning to his death by making it an occasion for conversion.
Let them be able to say that on this day, at Michael Richardson's funeral, I accepted Christ. Hey!
He called the younger members of the congregation to repudiate the life of those that killed him.
How many of my young people feel saved? Come on, raise your hands up high. Thank you, Lord. Hallelujah.
But the emotion generated in this church does not last long on the streets. These boys seem to have no real fear of death or expectation of a future.
I don't think I'm gonna live that long because all the bad stuff I know that I did, so, but I don't really care. It comes as it comes and goes as it goes, I can't control it, a bullet doesn't have a name, so if I get shot, what can I say, I get shot, I'm just shot.
The business I'm doing, it comes along with the game. Jail, shot, stuck up, everything. So I'm expecting to take a downfall, and I'm gonna stand up right back up tall. So I don't really care.
Bags over here, George. Have your programs out, please.
The ordinary routines of childhood bring no relief from reminders of the culture of violence. At this Chicago high school, the morning begins with a check for guns. It's estimated that every day, 135,000 of them are brought into American schools.
Come back to
This school used to be dominated by gang activity, gang banging as it's called. The last principal had his back broken by the pupils. His replacement introduced security systems and a dress code to keep out gang colors.
Thanks. Now you look handsome. I had to take the school from the gangs. It was either let the gangs run the school, nobody would get an education. Some teachers got hit before I got here. So I had to show to them that this is an educational institution rather than a playground where they can come over and gangbang.
Look directly into the camera. Smile. State your full name. Petros Delgado.
This year, identity cards are being introduced. Around 200 students here wind up in jail in an academic year.
Number 4. Thank you, Eric.
In the canteen, anything that might be used as a weapon has been removed. The trays are made of styrofoam, the knives and forks are plastic, and even the apples have been pureed. No one can leave the building during the day. There are 17 security guards and 2 full-time policemen. Even the lavatory doors have been removed, so they can't be used as hideaways.
It does, though, doesn't it, feel a bit like a prison? I mean, the rules are so strict.
It is, what I want to, is not, we want to go back to basics. All I'm asking the kids is to go to school, get to class on time, show up on time, and do your homework. That's the stuff that you and your parents and I had to do. I'm not asking them to do anything extraordinary.
Students who don't move fast enough are arrested for loitering.
Hurry up, let's go.
There is only one exception to the rule. Aldo, who's 17, was hit in the leg when he was caught in the crossfire between rival gangs and is allowed a little longer between classes. He's one of 6 pupils who were shot and wounded outside school hours last year. There are another 6 who won't be coming back at all. They were shot and killed. Highbridge is a town of some 4,000 souls in the hills of the New Jersey-Pennsylvania border. Not much happens to excite gossip at Casey's General Store or fill the local paper. Or at least it didn't until last month, when the people of Highbridge were jolted out of the easygoing rhythms of rural life.
Shock, disbelief.
On the first day of the new term at Highbridge Middle School, most of the pupils are renewing old friendships after the long summer break. Not so Jamie Moore. 2 of his friends won't be coming back. One has been shot dead, another is in custody, charged with the killing. The 3 had been friends until an argument just before term, which ended with Jake, who was 11, being shot in the head. Adam, the oldest of the group at 14, was accused of killing him.
A couple of days before the shooting, 4 boys, including Jacob Tracy, who was to become the victim, broke into the basement of this empty house and stole several guns. They hid them underneath the porch of the Tracy family home, which is just next door. The fact that the guns were so readily to hand was what turned what could have been a routine argument between friends into a killing.
The origins of the argument that culminated so tragically in this top-floor bedroom were trivial. Jake and Jamie had disagreed about a girl. Adam, the group's leader, ordered them to make it up. Jamie told us he agreed, and then watched the older boy threaten Jake with one of the stolen guns.
He told him, smile and say sorry, and if you don't, I'll shoot you.
And what did Jake do?
Jake said no, and then he shot him.
What did you feel when that happened?
Scared, because I knew we were going to be in deep trouble for breaking into the house. Plus my best friend's dead.
Highbridge is and will probably remain a much safer place than the inner cities, but what happened has changed people's perceptions. Whatever the statistics may say, it's enough to make them feel that the crisis of the inner cities is hitting small-town America.
It's the typical scene that you think, oh gosh, these poor people in New York, and it'll never happen in our town. And then for it to have happened was a tremendous shock. It's like you say, it always can happen to the next guy, but not to you.
A lot of people move to this community from the cities to get away from this sort of thing. So they're really shocked that it would happen here.
And that is to which shepherd?
That evening, the people of the town gather in the school hall to remember the dead boy. The pastors and priests of all its religious persuasions have come together, and Jake's school friends are allowed out late to attend. At the back of the hall, now an outsider here, is the father of Adam, the boy who pulled the trigger. Small-town America prides itself on the closeness of its communities and its ability to share the burden of grief. It's a comfort denied to the killer's father. Those monitoring youth violence at the federal government's Center for Disease Control have come up with a novel way of approaching it. They say it's now so serious, it should be treated like a medical epidemic.
Not only are more people being killed from firearms, but they're younger and younger. So in terms of premature years of life lost, it's increasing very quickly because we're killing younger and younger people in larger and larger numbers. Firearms are the second leading cause of death for young people in this country, not starting at age 19, not starting at age 14, starting at age 10.
Tonight, he was only 13 when he was charged with killing a British tourist in Florida, a child facing first-degree murder.
Michael Varela and his family attended today's sentencing for Anthony Veloz. In barely audible tones, Michael told the judge, "I want Anthony to go to jail."
Handcuffed and shackled, two 12-year-olds accused of shooting a homeless man more than 18 times are led into court in Wenatchee. The boys are facing first-degree premeditated murder charges.
Phoenix is a place where the old and rich come for winter sun, but it's gripped by one of the most dangerous symptoms of the epidemic. Much of the city the airborne police watch by night is under the sway of the street gangs spreading across America.
See if somebody was shot, if there might be a victim, or if we can see somebody out running.
Phoenix has its own task force to fight the gang plague. Its officers spend their nights stopping anyone they suspect of being in a gang and checking them against a database in which they have already documented the names of 38,000 gang members. These teenagers have been stopped for a traffic violation, but the officers of the gang squad are not averse to a bit of rough stuff as they search for the telltale signs of gang membership, though in itself it's not a crime.
Are you going to chill out?
I ain't going off for nothing.
Yeah, you're going off. I just saw you go off. What's your problem?
Don't fucking try this.
Now, I want to take a look at those tattoos.
Why?
Because it's my job.
This boy had 3 dots tattooed into his forearm.
I got 3 dots of shit.
Now, what's that stand for?
Nothing.
It stands for Mi Vida Loca, doesn't it?
No.
I mean, everybody in the street knows that. Why would you put that on your arm if you're not a gang member? Starting back to the late 80s and early 90s, the gang-related violence, youth violence in general, has been on an upward trend. Give you an example, 1993, our homicide rate attributed to gangs went up 600% in a 4-year period.
This is a gang party, a rich haul for the gang squad in their efforts to build a complete picture of the gang culture. The gang members are proud of their affiliation. They show off the badges they wear like the heraldic symbols of medieval knights.
Us wetbacks control everything, yes sir. We're everywhere. We don't die, we multiply, yes sir. Everybody knows.
They take mugshots because experience has taught them that if these teenagers haven't been in trouble yet, they soon will be.
Usually in a party like this, one or two of them will have a gun on them, and they'll probably have a couple of guns in their cars in case some rival gang members come up, and then they'll be able to defend themselves.
Because does a party like this provoke other gangs?
Yeah, well, it gives them an opportunity to come by and demonstrate their status, you know. That's what this is all about.
That's how James Wade wound up in a wheelchair. He now lives at home in need of constant care from his mother. The night he was shot began well. He bought a mountain bike to ride to school, paying with a rock of crack cocaine. He'd taken some drugs himself, drunk heavily, and uncharacteristically left his own gun behind when he went out. He got shot because he challenged someone from a rival gang. James was a veteran when it happened, an OG, or original gangster. He'd already been up before a judge no less than 13 times and had just served a 3-month term inside. His willingness to use violence had earned him his high rank in his own gang.
Part of the violence is getting your rank, and while you're little, you know, you really just talk a lot of mess. You know, you just woof and see how tough you are. Then when you start to get older, they start to make you show how tough you are. It's like something that picks up in your brain. When you're in the gang, you start to act tough. And so then when you get older, you start to show your ranking on how tough you really are. So the more you brag, the more you have to show.
And in James's neighborhood, showing these days often means killing. When he revisits it, he still wears blue, the color of his gang, the Crips.
What's up? Give me some love, nigga. Right around here, filming this shit. What's up, big baby? All right, kid.
To the many here who come from broken homes, the gangs provide a second family. Josh, who's 9, is already aspiring to join the next generation of gang members. He's the kind of boy James would like to save. But it won't be easy. Josh is already wearing the gang colors.
Do you ever want to have a gun in life, Josh?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Cut off my protection.
For your protection? From what?
Gangs. Other gangs.
Other gang members?
Mm-hmm.
My father wasn't never there for me when I was a kid. When I was your age, I didn't have no daddy. I don't know if you do or not.
Nope.
See, that's exactly what I'm getting at. See, Josh, I don't want to see you in jail. By being part of a gang, you're going to have to make decisions to have to want to either kill, get shot at. You might end up in a wheelchair without being able to feel your legs. You know how good it feels to run every day? Don't it feel good to run every day? Mm-hmm. See, it's a sacrifice you might make, and it's not worth it. It's not worth the sacrifice of spending your life. You're going to find people that love you. I know the gang feels like it brings you love because it did the same for me. But that's not the love you need. You need love from friends, but not to tell you you need to kill, not to tell you you have to sell dope to make a living. Don't ever believe that, because you can get a job.
Many of James's friends, even the 12 and 13-year-olds, already have their guns. They aren't hard to come by. There are plenty to steal. On the streets of Phoenix, a weapon like this can be bought for around $30. The oldest of the group said he'd been involved in a shootout only a couple of days earlier.
It was the enemy. Right on that slab shit, so a nigga just gave it up to him, let it happen. I dumped on him, just like that. I dump on anybody before they could give him a chance to dump on me.
You like shooting? Yeah, it's kind of orgasmatic, isn't it? Yeah, sure. Take up the slack.
The higher the level of violence, the more guns the middle classes buy, adding to the weapons available to be stolen. And while President Clinton tightens the gun laws, Arizona is relaxing them. It already permits people to carry a gun openly. This group is training to take advantage of a new state law allowing them to carry a concealed weapon.
It's even hitting the small towns now, gangs.
And I feel that I'm an easy target because I'm starting to get arthritis, and as I understand from reading the newspapers, the perpetrators like to get a woman, middle-aged or older, who is traveling by herself. They usually target that type of person. And I simply do not want to become a sacrificial lamb.
You have a friend that came over to visit you, and you run outside to meet her in the car. And all of a sudden, a guy comes up, and he's got a knife, and he grabs her from behind and pulls her hair, and he starts to stab her repeatedly stab her. What are you going to do, Marie? Well, do it. Do it. He's stabbing her repeatedly. Hit him, Marie.
The instructor here, Jim Cruz, is one of those wedded to an American's constitutional right to bear arms. Marie fired 4 times and missed the assailant each time. Whether she or the streets are any safer because she carries a gun is an open question.
This is a knife. That's a knife. This is a knife. Take it. What can you do?
I could stab.
Go! Get him! Stick him! Stick him!
I don't like stab.
Okay. You can take a gun and you can load it, you can cock the hammer, you can take the safety off, and you can lay it around for 1,000 years. Nothing's going to happen. It's when the smartest animal in the forest picks the pistol up, puts his finger on the trigger at the improper time, that's when we have a problem.
But if I'm angry and I've just got my fist, I can't do much damage with it. If I'm angry and I've got a gun, I can.
What's this?
It's a pencil.
It's a pencil, right? What is it now?
It's a dagger.
It's a dangerous instrument, right? What's the difference?
It's not as dangerous as a gun, though, is it?
Want to bet? That'll cut you, and it'll take your arm off, it'll take your nose, it'll take your face off. I'm more afraid of this than I am a gun, and that's a fact.
There is not much prospect of Arizona acting to reduce the number of guns. Instead, Phoenix has decided to keep young people off the streets with a curfew for teenagers.
How old are you? You?
15.
What time's curfew?
12 o'clock.
At 15 and under, they must be home by 10. 16 and 17-year-olds get an extra couple of hours. The car is searched for guns, but none is found. Juveniles they may be, but they're treated like any criminal, searched and handcuffed.
Okay, sir, you're under arrest for curfew violation. You're under arrest for violation of City Phoenix law curfew.
The police turned up no evidence that these boys had committed any crime, other than being out past their legally prescribed bedtime, but they were taken away to be held until their parents fetched them. The police believe it's an effective deterrent.
I've seen the difference. I'm not having the juveniles involved in shootings as either suspects or victims to the tune that we were, say, 3 or 4 months ago.
Curfews are becoming a more and more popular measure all over America, but they're being challenged in the courts for infringing the civil liberties of the young. It's early morning in the Georgia countryside, and a group of specially trained officers wait to get their hands on a new bunch of recruits. This is one answer to the increasingly urgent clamor for a cure for the epidemic.
Keep your mouth shut, come out of the van, and go down there and line up around the building.
It's what's known as boot camp, and these young offenders are about to get a taste of military discipline.
Don't look at me.
You better hurry up and get out that van.
You better give me a single file line, boy. Don't look at me. I said give me a single file line. Single file.
Do you understand that?
Me. You understand that?
Sir.
Don't look at me.
I can't hear you.
Yes, sir.
I can't hear you.
I don't like people with beards. I don't like people with mustache. I don't like people with blue eyes. So you got a hard way to go, boy.
Sir, yes, sir.
You better shut your mouth. I don't like people standing with their mouth open. You understand that?
Yes, sir, sir.
And you. I don't like people with their ears pierced. I don't like people with mustache. I don't like people with that kind of shirt on. I don't like you. I don't like any of them. You understand that? I don't even like myself. So you know you got a hard way to go, boy. You know you got a hard way to go. You belong to me. You belong to me. Boy, don't you belong to me. Give me a single file line on that line. Get over there. I just told you 2 ways to move running fast and fast.
This is a last chance. If they don't learn the hard lesson here, the next offence will mean prison.
I ain't up in there. Get back down.
Most of them are exhausted before they even get inside the gates.
Get yourself up. Get back down. You got your hands on your throat.
There's money in President Clinton's crime bill for more of these institutions.
I spent a year and a half in the Republic of Vietnam, and the life expectancy of a soldier wasn't very long, especially for the ages of someone between 18 and the age of 22. And I put that in the same category as growing up in the city of Atlanta or any other large city. It's like we fighting a war. What we are doing, we as a nation, is committing genocide. And there's got to be something we got to do. I don't know the answer, but I think this boot camp is a step in the right direction.
I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it. I like to move it, 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 move it. You like to move it.
4 hours of that treatment, and superficially at least, the new recruits had been reborn.
It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I think in 89 days, I don't think I'll go to church. I won't do anything wrong, man. My criminal days are over.
Some young offenders are well beyond the sort of treatment they get at boot camp. In common with an increasing number of states, Georgia has changed the law so that juveniles can be tried like adults.
We passed something called the 7 deadly sins, and that is that if a juvenile commits murder, rape, aggravated child molestation, voluntary manslaughter, armed robbery, aggravated sodomy, he will be prosecuted as an adult and he will face adult sentences. That is for any juvenile 13 years old and older. So a 13-year-old who comes into a grocery store, commits an armed robbery, will have to serve every day of 10 years without parole.
Do you think that's necessary to get the message home?
Yes, because we've got too many people dying, we've got too many children hurt, and the victims many times are children themselves.
This is the kind of place where juveniles sentenced by the adult courts will serve their time. Eastman Youth Detention Center was opened a year ago to house the most disruptive elements in the juvenile system. Now it's being expanded to house violent young offenders convicted of the 7 deadly sins.
20, sir.
So 21, sir.
So 22, sir.
So 23, sir.
24, sir.
We have the worst of the worst. The kids, young men that we have here are in for aggravated assault, murder, armed robbery, child molestation, bad kids.
And if you'll please find that in your dictionary, and we want to discuss what that means.
They get remedial teaching. The reading age of some of these teenagers is 5. Here they're being asked to define the word immoral.
All right, everybody listen.
Contrary to established moral principles.
All right, and what are moral principles? I mean, I know it's contrary to moral principles, but what are some things that are immoral?
But no amount of prompting produces an answer.
What are some established moral principles that we have then? What are some things that we are to do, we should do?
And what we're going to talk about is violence in the offender. And we want to...
In Eastman's regular counseling sessions, they try to treat even the worst offenders. Meet Anthony Burston. He started stealing bubblegum at 7 and murdered at 15. Sean Quackenbush. He had his first brush with the law at 9 and shot a man when he was 15. Charles Harris. He was 16 when he became a killer. All admit to other crimes.
Okay, guys, how many of you have shot other people and have not been charged with it?
Of the 87 inmates in Eastman Youth Detention Center, 79 grew up without fathers. And what role models they did have sometimes contributed to their development into hardened criminals. Many already have a deep-rooted addiction to violence, and they haven't even left their teens.
What's up? So like my pops, my uncle, my dad did 5 years for armed robbery. My uncle did 18 years for 3 counts of murder. So yeah, all my role models in prison anyway. That was all my footsteps.
Once you pulled the trigger, how did it make you feel?
Yeah, good. I didn't know what I'm saying. Like, he tried to pop me, so I popped him first.
Describe it. Describe the high. Describe it.
You get hyped up. You get, like me, I was geeked up when I did mine, you know what I'm saying?
Do you feel sorry about what you done?
No, sir.
So you say you was geeked up and you high. When you found out that the guy was dead, what was going on through your mind then?
The same thing that going through my mind now.
They look at themselves in the mirror sometimes and say, I say, what do you see? I see nothing. And it does not mean anything to them to kill another human being because they view themselves as nothing, and they look across and they see their peers as nothing.
Most of this group was sentenced under the old system and are due for release soon. Of the 40 released so far, 3 have been rearrested for murder.
We have more young people jailed now than we've ever had before. And yet at the same time, we have the highest homicide rate among young people that we've ever had. So prisons are necessary, but they're not sufficient. It's not enough. And we have to start to focus on prevention. If we look at the funds that go into the prevention of things like heart disease and cancer and even AIDS, you're talking about billions and billions of dollars. When you talk about the money that goes into research to prevent firearm deaths, you're talking about 1/1000th of that amount.
How many of you over the weekend has heard gunshots in your neighborhood? Wow. Put your hands down.
Officer Henry Jackson teaches a class of 7- and 8-year-olds about the danger of guns. Prevention is being tried, and the Clinton crime bill provides more money for it.
And a lot of young people are getting hurt or killed because of guns.
These children may seem a little young, but last year a 5-year-old in this school brought in a gun and fired it in class. This is part of a nationwide scheme, but no one really knows whether this sort of thing works. Though after 40 minutes, most of this group seem to have got the message.
Yes, hello. Yes, this is James Wade. I'm calling on behalf of Cox Cable today. And I just
James Wade, who now has a job selling cable television services, has been trying to teach a similar lesson on his forays into the gang neighborhoods of Phoenix.
And we're just calling on a special offer we have right now.
But despite all he's been through, even he doesn't really seem to have learned it himself.
Will you get a gun again?
Yes, I will get a gun.
Can you use one after what's happened?
Yeah. I'll use one with a splint like this I have. It's a wrist-driven splint, so when I want to pull the trigger, it just slips on my arm. My hands go in here. It's real good. I mean, I don't want to have to use it, but if I do, I will. You know, for the same reason, protection. For protection, because like I said, it's kill or be killed, and I'm not ready to die.
Hey, all right. Rock steady, man.
James says he wants his life to bear witness to the power of redemption and to be a symbol of hope to the next generation. But the real testimony it seems to offer is that his generation is condemned to continue its romance with the gun.